Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Saturday, which means it's time for a new FL12 Basics tutorial, and this one is on performance mode. This has been a long time coming, and now we're also going to start talking about it. I don't know how many parts this is going to be in. Basically, my plan is that this is going to be sort of like how you set it up and make it work, and then I'll have like a best practices video kind of thing. It's a bit of a confusing topic, and one of the reasons why it's so confusing is because it is extremely open-ended, which means that it's very easy for everybody to have a very different setup and work for their own particular thing. Various different kinds of controllers and whatever. There are of course controllers that FL supports, but even if they don't support it, you can just use most MIDI controllers and configure them in ways that will make them work with performance mode. For today, I am using a launch pad. This is actually a kind of an old launch pad because they have like whole new launch pads now. But this is my schmancy one with the FL logo on it that I got from ImageLine because they're cool people. But let's talk about this. So, setting up performance mode is pretty straightforward. There's actually a handy dandy macro where if you go into the macros, it says prepare for performance mode, and it'll set it up pretty much straightforward. And more or less, that's kind of really all you need to do. But I'm gonna go over building up that anyway. If you go to the drop down menu, you see here there's just this performance mode option where you can turn it on, turn it off. You can turn it on, and then there, now it's on. And not really anything changed, did it? Well, a couple things changed. And what's not immediately obvious is that now everything before the song start can be made into pads, and everything after the song start is where the arrangement gets recorded. You might be thinking, well, what the hell is the song start? The song is just the beginning, and there's no before the song start. What is this madness? Well, for that to happen, you need to actually make a marker and have it be a thing. I'm gonna call it start and call it what you want. And if you right click it, you see a bunch of options, and one of these says start. When you hit start, now if I move this, it creates this whole business. Now, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure this entire thing is basically being read as one whole pad. And that's what's up. So I put down a thing, and this clip is now being triggered on this pad. It thinks this entire zone is a single pad. And I think if I go down the tracks, I guess it'll actually, yeah, okay. So it thinks this entire row up here is all this one pad, and then all of these are basically on different tracks, kind of thing. I can do page up, page down, and you can see when I move up page up, page down, it actually shows me where I am on the screen. Now, to make more pads, we need to make more markers. Pads, and you can see now it creates a separation and a color. The decolor between the two that denotes which one is one and the other, that kind of thing. So now this is that pad, and then this should be the second pad. Okay. Okay. I figured it out. Sorry. So this pad is basically saying like this because this is the first one listed. This is it's the first pad. You can see this one's still the first pad, but that one's the second pad. So I just named that one there, and then this one here. It thinks these are the first two pads. And if I keep making markers, it'll eventually fill up all the top 8 rows. So that's how you get this to work so that you can actually create different pads. However, let's talk about that macro I mentioned earlier. This macro pretty much does all of that for you. That macro pretty much does all of it for you. I think it didn't do it because I screwed with it. So let's go to the new. The macro pretty much does all of it for you. There we go. So now it made set up a pads. It gives us a row of 16 pads, and it goes on, as far as you have tracks. So you might be thinking, I mean, obviously we move it around with the different windows. Like here's pad 1 and pad 8. If I go to pad 9, it's not there, but I am putting them down. So where are they, and how are they not there? And then you move whatever controller you have to face where it is, that kind of thing. It's infinitely easier when you have a controller that's been supported, which is to say that things like these arrow keys actually set up to do certain things. In this case, if you held on all 4 of them, now when I move around, it moves entire pages at once instead of just one pad at a time, like it did in default. And I can go down and up and down and around. And then there's also these pages. These are another cool thing about the support for various controllers is that different playing modes. Man, that looks really weird on my webcam. But different note triggering modes are present, and you can use those to dude, I just can't get over what that looks like on my webcam. Wow. I assure you this isn't actually a light board from Vegas. Although, if you're ever curious about why, like how Launchpad does its lightness and darkness thing, it might be pretty obvious just by looking at it. But over here, these ones aren't strobing because they're on all the way. They're on their total brightness. And then these guys are being pulsed with. They're being pulsed. And this is how it makes it appear as though it's darker, because it's not actually dimming. It's just turning on and off really fast so that not enough light's coming out. And it's freaking out against the camera's frame rate, which is causing it to do this crazy strobing stuff. Which is why that's happening, in case you were curious. Yeah. So let's get back to the real pages. All right. Go back up. Yeah. So this is how you get pads set up, and this is, for the most part, a lot of obvious controllers are supported by ImageLine. Things like the MPDs, launch pads, APCs, that kind of thing. And every time there's like a new one coming up, they take a look at them and they work on them. They're pretty diligent about it because it is pretty sweet when it works. So this is how you get, you know, that more or less stuff to work now. Let's talk about the kind of content that can be inside this area here. So this is still the playlist. This is still the regular playlist, which means the content that's put in there is still can be triggered in there the way they are. So like if I made an entire pattern, and that's pattern 1, when I trigger pattern 1, it's going to play that pattern. Now you might notice that when I hit things, stuff isn't actually happening. And this is because performance mode is set up and primarily as a method for live arrangement, where you're more or less writing your songs on the fly with manual triggering, that kind of thing. So this means that it really only works when you're actually playing something. Now, if I were to split this up into 2 patterns, so instead of having both parts there, I had a second part. That's not the pattern control, that's the pattern control. A second part in the next pad. You can still trigger it like that. And it got a little bit weird there, but notice if I were to do this, it's looping according to the clip size. We'll talk about loop controls and syncing and that kind of thing, because there's a lot of control about that. Let's talk more about parameters. So you could have patterns, you could have audio. We can just straight up have audio. Mouse, what's wrong with you? Wow, that was loud. And that's all well and good. And this is actually a good point to notice that even though this clip actually goes into the next pad, the pad where it begins is the pad where it'll be triggered. So like this still only shows up as 1 pad. It's not gonna show up as 2 pads for whatever. And this could actually be like infinity long. It could be an entire song, but it'll still only be triggered from that pad. I didn't actually want to time stretch it. So that's a point, a good thing to realize. And you could also have automation in there. So like if I wanted to have like volume automation, like this pad coloration that shows up when you're in performance mode, it's at the default, you know, sizing area, which would normally you would show, you know, the actual clip contents. If you make it just a little bit bigger in the zooming, it'll actually let you, you know, mess around with it. So just in case you want to know about that. And now we can have automation. So now the obvious question you might have is, cool, can I trigger automation and a clip of something else on the same pad? And the answer to that question is no. For technical reasons, triggering 2 elements in the same pad doesn't really work out that well, but there's actually things you can do to make that work anyway. Like, for example, I could just trigger the audio in the sequencer and then also trigger the animation clip in the sequencer, and now that pattern that I have, I put in pattern 2 by mistake. Let's not do that. Let's put in pattern 3. So trigger audio, trigger automation, and then make that a pad. That will trigger them both at once. It'll also loop around, so you want to like keep control of how long the things are. This is of course dependent on what kind of looping settings you have for your track. So the pads, you set up the pads in a way that you can trigger them when their content's there, but then the actual things like looping and syncing, that kind of stuff, are controlled on a track by track basis. So that this entire row of pads will be controlled by the settings present in this track. So we have a whole just bunch of options. We have things like retrigger. So when you press it, it'll bring it at the beginning. This hold and stop, hold and motion, latch. Lots of fun things. And here's like the motion type. So it says things like hold and motion. It'll give you whatever actual motion it is. And it has the sync. So the syncing is when it says every 4 beats, it'll only, like if I were to hit it, it'll cue it up and then it won't play it until it gets to that moment. If I turned off sync, it'll play whenever I tell it to play. So the stay business here is what's making it loop over and over again. If I turn it to just one shot, you'll stop. So the march settings are particularly cool. Let's talk about the presses for a second. What's hold and stop? I'm pretty sure hold and stop is when it'll play as long as I'm holding it. Yeah. So that's how that one works. That's hold and motion, where I believe it has to do with what the actual motion type is. We'll talk about motion in a second, but I just wanted to be clear about what I'm talking about. And then latch, which is it's on and then off when you hit it. So it's on when you hit it. It's kind of like a sustained note, and then you off when you hit it again, like a note off. So let's go to hold and motion. So let's talk about the motion. So if I had it on stay, it would loop when I held it on stay. And there's march and wrap, and then marching. Let's talk about the marching. Marching is essentially when you can set up a sequence on the pads that are on the track. So like if I had other things happening. And I set it to hold it. Let's do march and wrap. So I have hold and motion on it right now. So that means that when I hold it, it'll go through the motion, and then the motion is march and wrap, which means I'm pretty sure that means it'll loop through these and then it'll keep going through them. I may have been wrong about that. That was a little weird. What? So that's the same. I'm confused. Let's put it on retrigger. I want to disable this. Okay. So that's what I thought I was going to do, where it'll loop through. It'll basically when it's done playing this one, it'll play the next one, it'll play the next one, play the next one. And the cool thing about this particular thing is that it's not like pad length required. Like all the pads they're all four beats long, and that whole thing. But once it plays this guy, it'll play this guy, and the instant it's done playing this, it'll play this guy too. So that means this pad is actually half the length of this one, and this one's only 3/4 long, and that one's 1/4 long. So if you have like a drum beat and you slice it up like that, it'll still play each individual part as long as it needs to be. And the steps, they don't have a unified length. They'll be as long as whatever the individual elements are, which can be cool for like loop shuffling and that kind of thing. Learning. So march and stay is where it'll loop through it, and it'll stay on the last clip. And then there's march and stop, where it'll play through the whole thing and then stop. And there's random, where it'll play whatever it wants. And exclusive random, which I believe means it'll play whatever it wants, but it won't play the same thing twice until it plays all of them at least once. We also have Q in the syncing option. So I have trigger sync off just so that when I hit it, it would hit it when I hit it. But you have sync on all the various types, which are they're basically like the hold kind of sync. And what I mean by that is that if you miss a beat and you hit after the beat, it'll hold it until the next sync moment, which can be cool. But to be totally honest, when I'm doing this kind of stuff, I actually full on prefer to not have sync and just rely on my own timing. And if you've ever seen my Bass Antics project, which is available in the project's performance mode stuff, the syncing is not on for any of that, and you're pretty much responsible for playing all the things, which seems like a lot harder, but it feels better for me personally. That might be you, no, that's fine. And this is what I mean by people have their freedom to set this stuff up however they want, really, and they're only limited by how they feel like they want to use it. And then there's position sync. So position sync is when you have position sync is where you have, like, if you play another pad in the middle of another pad, it'll keep that position linked through all the pads. So like if I stop playing one pad halfway through and I begin another pad, it'll start playing that pad halfway through as well. There's actually another project in the setup, in the performance mode. You should really look at all of these. They're pretty sweet. Like the Nucleon projects are pretty cool. This Complextreon one, I believe, has a lot of position sync setup where there's a whole bunch of different sounds that are playing more or less the same progression, and you can just switch through them at will. And it'll keep playing through the progression. It'll keep going through the whole thing in the way it's supposed to, but you can change which one is basically live. And that's a neat application of that particular process. Indeed. So for the most part, this is what you got, and this allows you to do the very wide amount of things. Like I said, I mean, there are some limitations, like you can't play more than one thing on a pad. But if you can have more than one thing on a pad, and I kind of needed those. It'll just be very, it'll have a very specific function. In this case, what it'll do is every time you hit a pad, and you have the content on that pad, it'll cycle through what that content is. So if I did one shot on Retrigger. So if I keep playing the same pad, it'll cycle through what elements are in there. For the most part, like, it is a bit of a bummer that you can't play more than one thing at once. You also can't play more than one pad on the same track at one time. For the same technical limitation are for just playing multiple things on the same pad. But you can get around that if you plan for it with doing things like putting things in a whole pattern, because you can really have, as Goal mentioned to me before, he said that you can really have an entire track just in a pattern if you were that dedicated to being in a pattern. You can trigger automation clips, you can trigger audio, you can trigger whatever you want just with this. And if you have a setup that works in the piano roll, it'll work that way as well. I'll get more into that in the next part, which I just decided is going to be converting a regular project into a performance mode project, depending on your style. That'll be what I do. This is gonna be more about the actually, like, starting up some stuff. So yes, I'm trying to think if there's anything more important about what's happening here. If you hit record while it's playing, like I've just been playing it this whole time. But if you hit record while it's playing, just turn it to automation and score. It should have actually recorded what you were playing there. It's not something I use a lot. I guess clips, whatever. Let's just record all of it. You set that right? Okay. Right-clicking the record option gets you that, by the way, in case you don't want to have that dialogue pop up. Boop, boop, boop. Yeah, there it is. It shows up. So this is basically the function with which performance mode was designed. The idea that you set up all your stuff, and then, like, the song that you're writing a song, live, basically. That's what it's for. A lot of people mostly just kind of want to just play it, like live, and the only kind of recording they're going to do is basically audio recording, like what I did for the Bass Antics video. But I just wanted to make sure you knew that was a thing that could happen. That's how that works. Okay. There are a lot of, like, launch pad specific things, like, and they just the breadth of stuff that the controllers do is a little epic. And for that, I recommend that you read the manual. Like there's specific functions, like how if I hit an empty pad, it'll unselect whatever clip I had selected, and if you have these guys will also undo every clip selection. I mentioned earlier about how there's like, if I do like this moves the page forward and backward, and if I hit all 4, it moves an entire page all at once. And there's also like these other special pages and that kind of thing that are set up to be a specific thing, and like these kinds of specific stuff exist for all the controllers that they have support for, and they're going to be different for most of them. Like the NPCs, the APCs, the MPDs, machines, they all have different setups that work with what they have to accomplish that same level of functionality. And for that, you'll need to check the manual, and the performance mode section has a lot of that stuff already listed out. And it's a pretty good time, and gives you lots of cool ideas about things you can do. It's funny. I used to think that like having this many buttons was like just dramatic overkill, and like why would you ever need more than 16? But then like I started using one, and I was like, wow, I need like more. I need 11 of these. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah, so I think this is pretty good for this video. It was interesting to watch me kind of like forget some things, but that's okay. Like I said, one of the values of performance mode, the way it's set up, and honestly the way that FL set up in general, is that it enables you to do sort of whatever you want, however you want. And there's going to be a lot of things that like I don't want to do because I don't need to do it, but there's going to be a lot of stuff that you want to do because that's what you want, what you do. And what we do is going to end up being completely different, but we're still using the same system. How cool is that? Anyway, if you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.